Whangare Takiwā, a hui for Tuesday, 3rd of November. A very warm welcome to all our elected members, our council staff, and to our members of the public who are in our public gathering today. Our meeting has 2 items on our agenda today, but before we commence our meeting, I would like to ask our Māori Relationships Manager, Hama, to open our meeting with a karakia.
Kia ora e tātou, mā ngāmi kia tātou. We can gather in a oneness of thought to invoke a blessing on today's proceedings. Kia karakia tātou. Rere e pāi tō mātou matua pui te rangi. Tēnei rā mātou e koropiko nei ua i tō aroa i te haora tēnei haka. I tuku atu nei mātou i tō mātou reo haka whiatai kia koe mō ngā mana ki tama katoa ka mei ngā wiki mai a mātou. I me kaua tu ana mātou kia koe kia tata mai tō wairua tapu kia mātou i tēnei rā. Kia arahi koe ngā kōrero ka kōrero ia i roto i tēnei hui. Kia hua mai ai e hua. Hau anō mō mātou nahe e hui nei e mani mō tō mātou takiwā o whāngā re utanoa. Nā rea koe a tēnei ko tā mātou i noi ka te hua tēnei kia koe. I runga anoi te ingoa tapu o tāu tapaiti ai hukaraiti. Amen.
Councillors, we do have 2 items, but we also have the public forum to commence our meeting today. We received an application from Tim Howard to speak, and also we received a late application from Ian Peters, and I had to use my discretion under standing orders to allow 2 members to speak, if Ian just also speak. So Tim Howard, please come forward and present to us. You have 5 minutes in our public forum for you to be able to address us on the topic of Māori wards.
Tēnā rā koe, ko matua, tēnā rā koutou. Tēnā koe, te kai hapai o tātara, tēnā tēnā kia koe, nau te anga. Kia ora mai. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. And I know others have spoken before you in terms of in this community forum, taking different perspectives on the Māori wards, so I'd just like to honour the opportunity of addressing that subject. I'm from Northland Urban Rural Mission, addressed the council, and NURM has addressed the council many times over the years. We're a group with community development, economic, social, environmental justice, and particularly Tiriti justice focus. So it's on that base that I wanted to speak. There are lots of thoughts swirling around about Māori wards. I think councillors have been having swirlings all around you recently too, but actually there's a lot of thoughts, and I just want to make a few points and tie it down to a couple of things. There's a lot more that can be said. And I'm happy to respond to questions if it's still within the 5 minutes. The main point in this, though, is I would like to say that our group, but actually we're hearing from a lot of communities in the district, are open and supportive to the development of Māori wards. And you know, from some of the traffic you may not have got that impression. Actually, there's quite a strong support, probably stronger than 3 years ago. So I just wanted to make that context. Just want to make 2 points. Excuse my back. I just want to make 2 points that are interconnected, I think. And they are both about the proposal can do things in one way. First, I just want to note some misconceptions about Te Tiriti or Waitangi. Some say it was about making us one people. That was never the case. And even though Governor Hobson was quoted some 50 years later, it wasn't recorded until 50 years later that we are one people. That was never what the treaty was about. The treaty was about an affirmation of the authority and mana of hapu, of iwi in this country. And mainstream historians, the Waitangi Tribunal, and others have constantly affirmed that. There are a few other voices, but I'm just going to say it's about affirming Māori roles. So it's not about one people. Similarly, I would like to say that democracy is not just one single thing. universal, unchangeable. There are many forms of democracy. All of them could usefully be adapted to better meet the rights of Indigenous peoples and of minorities, who typically tend to get overridden by majority voice. And I'd also note that Māori seats, establishing Māori seats, contrary to what some say, was established through a democratic process, but it was limited. Our version of local government that comes out of our history and out of that legislation is flawed and can do with adaptation. But having Māori elected representatives alongside general representatives is a legitimate form of democracy and one to be desired. There are many different pathways towards inclusion. It doesn't have to be one pathway to get to that inclusive space. So, Te Tiriti and democracy, it's not just about us all being the same. I've heard said in a legislative paper, all councillors can speak for Māori. But I would say it's something to have Māori councillors elected by Māori out of Te Ao Māori, bringing that lens to the whole collaborative approach of the council and the council table. There's a history of Māori seeking political voice, going to the English Crown a number of times, etc. There's been a history in this area of generosity of Te Tirero Kukapa, of the hapu of this area, to welcome and collaborate with new settlers. There's a disappointment. So that the voice of Māori has been lost in that time. So I have a lot of optimism for the future. Change can be creative, and providing hope for young Māori who can see pathways to have their voices to be part of the decisions that shape this district's direction. That is hopeful. Long-term plans, 30-year plans, can start with initiatives like this. I look forward to find in the future, and looking back about what's happened, I was really impressed that the current and previous regional chairs of the Eastern Bay of Plenty reflected on their experience of having Māori wards, and they were cautious at the beginning, both of these people, but actually said very clearly, this has been a great step towards creating harmony. So I commend that thought to you, to a future of cooperation and inclusion in this particular way. Kia ora mai tātou.
Councillors, are there any questions or term for clarification? Thank you very much.
Thank you for the space.
Councillors, our second presenter in the public forum today is Ian Peters. A very warm welcome to you, Ian. Familiar with our chambers?
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning and to share with you all my view on this exceptional controversial topic of Māori representation or placement on district or regional councils and the like. To better understand this direction, we need to look back at New Zealand's political history as it pertained to Māori. At the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840 and up to 1852, New Zealand was under the control of governments. The New Zealand electoral franchise established in 1852, the Constitutional Act, which was considered to be colourblind, but in fact very few Māori could vote because it was based on two premises. You had to have separate land title or lease land more than 10 acres. Very few Māori qualified. Māori land was multiple owned and without title. In their own country, they were disenfranchised. In 1853, only about 100 Māori voted out of electorate of 5,849 people. In 1859, the British Crown Law was confirmed that Māori could not vote unless they had individual land title granted by the Crown. This led to Māori representation in Parliament through the Māori Representatives Act 1867, which allowed 4 Māori seats in Parliament, 3 in the north and 1 for the whole of the South Island. This was only intended to be a temporary measure, but it soon became permanent and became a victim of neglect. Up until 1951, it was held on different days and sometimes weeks later. In 1870, Europeans were granted the right to ballot vote. Māori were granted this right in 1938. In 1967, the law allowed Māori to stand in European seats, although James Carroll had a general seat from 1893 to 1919. In 1975, Ben Couch won the seat of Wairarapa, as a Māori in the National Party, and Rex Austin won the seat of Aotearoa. My brother Winston won Tauranga and Henua, and I won Tongariro in 1990 under first past the post. And that is the basis of why I stand here today. This background information is important because the Royal Commission set up in 1985, when referring to Māori seats in 1986, concluded in their report that separate Māori seats had not helped Māori and that they would be better off through a proportional party list. They concluded that if MMP was voted in, then Māori seats should be abolished. In 1996, Māori seats were increased by one, the first alteration in its 129-year history, and then increased in 2002 by a further 2. There are now at least 15 Māori in Parliament, and the new cabinet is made up of 25% Māori. The question today is, why are Māori not winning in local body elections? Your district council has had several Māori councillors, including a mayor, Mr. Williams, who served, of memory, 24 years. If he was a Māori, he was a Māori. He was in the public arena, the public liked him, and they voted for him. So you can kind of see now where I'm coming from. The question I ask is, are Māori not capable of taking their place in democracy? Are we unable to stand along with others and fight for the right to enter the kind of leadership that the district council is presenting through councillors? In other words, Māori representation will be chosen by a few if you follow the new process that you taught as my personal view. I ask the question today of you all, is this really your solution? Are Māori to be judged not equal? Why are they not contesting for the right to represent their people? Do you really believe that a selected person is going to be considered an equal of those who have fought for the right to win? I'll close very shortly. My Māori background does not inhibit nor detract. I've been a Justice of the Peace since 1978, and the same year became a national accreditation should have been judge. I've served on many committees across different groupings in the community. What I'm saying loud and clear is that the answer is not in your proposition to select in this way. I do have a master's degree, but when I contested for the National Party seat of Tongariro in 1987, I did so as someone who only had 2 years secondary school. I entered into the contest against 10 other candidates. I was chosen through the contest. I gained the biggest majority of the National Party in 1987 in a rural seat. I won that seat in 1990 against the Cabinet Minister. I stand here and tell you, I believe that Māori are equal. If you lower the standard, if you change the rules, you are saying that we're not equal. And just on a fun side, I'm probably more than equal because I don't fish with a hat on. I don't get sunburned. Thank you very much.
Councillors, any questions for clarification for Ian? Thank you so much for taking the time to come and
So that's probably changing one.
Councillors, as I indicated, we have 2 items on our council agenda today. I'm going to bring item 4.2, 2022 elections Māori representation forward and address that first. In so doing, I would like to move that Council approves the establishment of Māori Ward for the 2022 and 2025 elections and publicly notifies the opportunity for electors to demand a poll. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Peters has seconded. Councillors, thank you for the presenters who have given us some of the history. I've also got a bit of history that I'm going to add to. The winds of change are blowing. Today we are the fourth of the four councils in Te Tai Tōparo to consider Māori representation on council. Northern Regional Council has elected to introduce a Māori constituency, and Kaipara District Council has voted to introduce Māori wards both for the 2022 and 2025 elections. Far North District Council will be taking their decision after conducting a poll at the next election in 2022. Our decision today will be viewed by people as either democratic or undemocratic, visionary or racist. I see it as giving fair representation to people in our community who have been underrepresented since the signing of Te Tiriti o Waikato. Among some of the feedback that we have received from all over this country, we have been asked to consider democracy. Democracy is ever evolving. It has adapted over thousands of years to address flaws, opportunities and limitations, and as we've heard, even giving men without property the right to vote. From its beginning, New Zealand's Parliament has adopted the Magna Carta's ideals of individual liberty and freedom. We use the Westminster parliamentary system as defined in the New Zealand Constitution Act of 1852. The right to vote was available from 1852 with limited property qualifications. Universal manhood suffrage came about in 1879 and female suffrage came in 1893. As we've heard, Māori have had representation in Parliament since 1867, at which time 4 Māori seats were established to be held by elected Māori MPs. And today we have 7. Parliament and the way it conducts its business is not the way our treaty partners, not the way of our treaty partners, nor is the way Council conducts its business the way of the marae. Māori wards were made available to local government in 2001 with amendments to the Local Electoral Act. The Bay of Plenty Regional Council was the first council in New Zealand to establish Māori constituencies in 2004. Tipini Mā, one of the first councillors elected onto that council as a Māori councillor, said in April last year, "You need to understand, we're not getting power. The seats, we're getting representation. We're getting a say." Waikato Regional Council and Wairoa District Council also have Māori seats. Can I encourage if members of the public wish to clap? Can you use the Māori? Thank you. Recently, Ruapehu District Council, Tauranga District Council and New Plymouth District Council voted to introduce Māori wards at the 2022 and 2025 elections. The numbers are growing. Those winds are blowing. We have options to ensure we meet our legal obligations under the Local Government Act, which requires us to provide opportunities for Māori to contribute to decision making. The Local Electoral Act provides the opportunity and the mechanisms. Our options for representation and participation include establishing Māori wards, appointing members to committees. You'll recall that we had Julianne Chettam in a former iteration of our council. And Wellington City Council has just opted for this option with the appointment of 2 iwi members to all its committees. Another option is to establish a standing committee. Tick for us. I am proud of our council's ongoing and meaningful development of its relationship with our hapu partners. We had our inaugural Te Kāriarea Strategic Partnership Standing Committee just last week. We heard endorsement for Māori wards from hapu members on the committee. Māori wards were described as transformative change, as footsteps for our tamariki and mokopuna. We were encouraged to embrace change. A committee and wards ensure both representation and participation. They are complementary. This morning, I received emails from Janelle Beasley and Taipei Munro, among others, and I would like to read them for the public record. This one is from Taipei. I'm emailing on behalf of my marae and hapu at Poroti Whatatiri with regard to the meeting of council being held on Tuesday, 3rd of November, and specifically the agenda item regarding Māori wards. Please inform the council meeting that Mongarongo Marae and Hapu, Te Orioroi, Te Parafo, and Te Manuhiri ki Whatatiri collectively support Māori wards in Whangarei district. And there were two from Janelle. The first reads, I'm sending this email on behalf of Te Takiwā o Ngā Puhi ki Whangarei. Te Takiwā o Ngā Puhi ki Whangarei is a takiwā attached to Te Reunanga a iwi o Ngā Puhi. We are the takiwā who support Ngā Puhi via the 11 marae within the Whangarei district and also the urban Ngā Puhi living within our city. Our takiwā is represented by the following marae: Pehiawari, Te Maruata, Taiharuru, Whakapara, Nararatunua, Otaika, Toi Toi, Whangarei Te Ringa Paraua, Te Pua Waitanga Ko Hou, E Paraima, and Tauhinari Marae. And we send this email to acknowledge and support the proposition of Māori wards. The other Janelle was sent on behalf of Te Huinga, the group represented by the Hapu of Whangarei. The following Hapu fully support the proposition of Māori wards: Te Parafo, Te Orewai, Ngāti Takapari, Ngāti Toki, Ngāti Horahia, Patu Harakeke, Ngā Hapu o Whangaruru, Ngāti Hou, Te Urioroi, Ngāti Kahu o Torongare, Te Whānau o Rangi Whakahu, Te Mahurere ki Whakatiri, and Te Waiariki. Ngā Manaakitanga, Janelle. Some of the adopted values of our Te Kārea Strategic Partnership Committee, they include whakarite, invest time and energy in building decision-making capacity and capability. Te manawa tōpū, of one heart and mind. We are stronger working together. Kia maia, providing leadership through courage. These are our adopted values of Te Kārea. There are no guarantees that the next council will choose to set up a standing committee for Māori. It is important for me to know that Māori will be leaving a legacy for Māori, that we will be leaving a legacy for Māori representation for future councils in Māori wards. The debate today will bring forward a range of responses from elected members. I trust we will treat all opinions with respect, knowing that democracy enables us to come to the decision-making table with an open mind, reflecting the various views of our community, and with a duty to make a decision without fear or favour. I've lost my place. I'm sure I've got one more bit of paper. And probably not. So I will open up the decision for debate and encourage you all to participate today. Yeah. Crikey, I'll put the motion down. Councillor Conn.
Kia ora and welcome. My name is Councillor Connor, and I start off today by embracing all three official languages of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Māori, New Zealand Sign Language, and English. I must ask for forgiveness because my speech is limited to in the other two, but I'm trying to learn as I go. Over the past week, I've received around 117 emails, including many templates, inaccuracies for our district, and many reasons to stick with the status quo. Many people complain that they wouldn't be voted by the public at large through Māori wards. Currently, I can only vote for 4 people in my own ward. I don't have a say on 9 other people around the council. I can still vote for the mayor, but I'm already limited, so that kind of moves that point. It's an issue, but that's something completely different. Including Maori-based wards ensures a Maori voice in council. It does not show favoritism. It ensures that the Local Government Act is followed. It does not denounce their ability to win a seat, and there is nothing stopping anyone from running in any other ward. This improves the connection with Maori. It ensures that there is someone representing Te Ao Māori. Te Ao Māori denotes the Maori worldview. There's so much more depth than what is on the surface. Yes, Maori think differently to others. Through Te Reo Māori, their language, Tikanga Māori, protocols and customs, and the Treaty of Waitangi. The treaty is regarded, as we've heard before, by the Crown as establishing a fair basis for 2 people in one country, which is what we've based this country on. Over the years, we've become more multicultural. However, many of the cultures respect the mana of the Māori tangata whenua. While I appreciate some of the emails view us as one people, I do agree that we are the human race. I do wonder if those who have emailed us have embraced the culture of the tangata whenua. As they say, they are a part of them as we are one people. The 4 well-beings have been out of balance for a long time. People only focus on the economic corner, while the cultural, social, and environmental have been seriously underfocused. Stresses on living in a capitalist society have pushed many to breaking point, and the greed of some people is inhumane. We are on Papatuanuku, Mother Earth, for a limited time, and that is which is in our possession is only ours to be caretakers. We look after it for a time before passing it on to the next, or to wherever it goes. The Maori view of kaitiakitanga, guardianship and protection, is a testament to that. You only have to see how our society sees the value of trees, land, and our waste. There's synthetics out there, it's stuff that may last forever, that is a single-use item that is still there today. Just the other day I picked up an item that still had the best before date of 2015, and it was still in perfect condition. That was just on the riverbanks. Last night from around midnight, we all received emails, and I had a whole lot more this morning. There was one in particular that was trying to send an email through 2 hours after trying to get her 9-month-old to sleep, and it just wouldn't go to sleep. She says from her email, I watched live online, heart in my throat, as the NRC recently voted in support of Maori wards. I won't lie, there were tears. I felt heard and seen, and like the council, acknowledged that Maori matter. This is the proof that online streaming is benefit reaching to those who can't get here, who can't be here, to be able to see as well. Aside from that, but it is great to see so many people in stands of varying ages as well. We have the support of Tihuinga, Te Kerere, and other marae, as Cheryl have just mentioned just before. While it may not be supported by all, what or who is? Over time, Māori have become a minority when they were once a majority. We should support the creation of Māori wards and explore this path. I would happily offer my seat at election time. I will be running again, but regardless of the next election, I am not going anywhere. I am a kaitiaki of whangarei whenua.
Thank you, Councillor Connor. Councillor Golightly, you do.
Yes, like Councillor Connor, we've been inundated with emails for and against, and I've lost sleep over this one. Your Worship, you have spoken and said without fear that we speak today, and I can't guarantee there is not fear here, but I'm going to do my best. We are all elected as representatives of our district with a range of diversity amongst us and varying opinions. I have thought about this, and I've gone back and forth to all our councillors, and I just can't get past a few key points that I've actually sort of written down in the last few days and thought about. I believe, and this is my opinion, that special privileges based on ancestry or ethnicity feel to me that they are discriminatory and they risk deepening our already widening social division. I also believe that political rights in a democracy are based, and I know this probably more than most people here, are based on citizenship and not on ethnicity. I also feel that a dedicated Māori representation would not be impartial. I feel that it would be expected that the councillor would be focused on securing entitlements for local Māori interests with no obligation to consider the best interests of our diverse and wider communities. And I believe that that's what we as local representatives were elected for. So I will not be supporting Māori needs today. Thank you.
Councillor Gurley. I've got Councillor Peterson and Councillor Moore.
Kia ora koutou katoa. A lot of points have been put forward, as Councillor Golightly has said. She mentions that Māori would be representing a special group of people, but in fact, my understanding, Māori seats if they're voted on, once they're voted here, like all of us, they represent all of the constituents, not just their own. Some also probably are thinking, well, we've got Te Kāre there, good enough. But I say it's an either-or situation, but both and I take the Mayor's point that this, if we manage to decide on it, will actually ensure Māori voice past this council meeting. I'm actually persuaded that it is high time that we establish these Māori seats within the Whangarei districts. There's been a call from Te Kāre there and from local hapu and marae, the various marae. I also am interested in local history and what happened to my ancestors and some of the other Pākehā ancestors that came here when they came here. They were welcomed. They were welcomed with open arms. They were sold land. This was not a conflictual place. It was a place of welcome. And local hapu believed that Pākehā would leave and add to this area. And so that welcome, they were actively, this local hapu here were actively involved in the declaration of independence and Te Treaty because they also believed that Pākehā would add to the lives of their whanaunga. They entered into collaboration. Our family's living on land, of course, that was sold to it. Sold not directly to it, but was sold to Pākehā. What they didn't expect was to become powerless in their own land. Yet, despite that welcoming, hapu in this area have been some of the most trampled on in areas to do with wine and water, for example. Their political voice has been silenced and ignored. Local government has also at times been hostile to Māori aspirations. Sitting in marae, I've often heard the call for Māori seats, to have a voice in decision making, to have a voice in local government. It seems to me this is a response to this problematic history and ongoing disenfranchisement. Many candidates who have attempted to stand to represent Māori have stood and failed. Having Māori awards isn't a full healing of this history of trampling, but it's a small step in the right direction. Elsewhere, Māori wards have been established, and some actually are achieving some of these aims. Some people have thought that Māori wards should be left for later, when people have an appetite for it. I say the time is now. We need to be brave, to be actual leaders, to face the issue now. We need to take the opportunity to do what is right. This is our time to make this decision. We can't put it off. We need a process to have representatives at the table chosen by Māori, Māori specific representation, representing Te Ao Māori. And that is an advantage not just for Māori, but also for Pākehā, because that brings, that leavening brings new information to the table. Many people say we live in a just society, but I disagree. Māori access to justice, equity in health, and to a strong economic base, and indeed at times a political voice, has been constrained and limited. Standing here, I think about my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren who live here. I want there to be a mechanism in that world, in their world, to resolve conflict, because conflict happens, and to build harmony. This is one step towards that society, and we're ready for it. Last night I was in Hihiawa at the closing of Tuia 250, and Te Warahi spoke beautifully at the closing ceremony, and his words stay with me. We need to have a basis to air our differences of purpose. We need to have a base to walk forward. We need to connect. We need to reconnect a path of our peoples together. This is part of that path.
Councillor Cockerill.
Yes. Madam Chair, I would like to move amendment, please. The amendment would be actually option 4, which is approves the conduction of a poll of electors on the establishment of Māori wards in conjunction with the 2022 elections.
Can I just check that that is not a direct negative?
It's definitely not a direct negative.
I'm going to check that with the advisors. Thank you. Do we have a seconder for the amendment? You've spoken, Councillor Gallagher. I'll second. So deeming a seconder. Councillor Cockerill.
Madam Chair, the councillors have been, as has been highlighted, inundated with emails, phone calls, discussions amongst the public. And what I feel our concern actually is, or what I'm hearing the true concern actually is consultation. People are feeling neglected. People are feeling not listened to on both sides. And the only fair, true way to do that is to allow it to become to the public, for all of the public to have their say. As I have said previously in this council, it is all very well the 14 of us making a decision. But this is a decision which affects every single person within our district. And we haven't involved them all at once. And this opportunity actually allows that to happen. In 2007, I stood for council, and I stood on the act of the binding referendum, because I believe in bringing our public with us in every decision that we make. And when we have councillors talking about here and saying that there's one group of people that are feeling left out, I can tell you there are hundreds of people who are feeling left out among the decisions that this council makes. The disability community regularly talk about how this council makes decisions and it doesn't help them in any shape or form. We regularly have people telling me that council's just made this decision and it's handcuffed me. I can no longer do anything with my property. And if we are truly here for the people of Whangarei, if we are truly here, we will be wanting to bring them along with the discussion. We'll be wanting them to actually make that choice. Because right now, I can tell you, if we turned around and said no to Māori wards, or yes to Māori wards, there would be a petition made which will cost this council about $100,000. Whereas if we take it to the poll, we're looking at $9,000 cost. You know, this is not just a democracy thing, this is actually a cost for our public, because it is our ratepayers who actually pay the bill. And it is important for every one of them to be there. I can talk about the disaffranchation, the things, the different aspects of being a minority on this council, being the only attempt here, may I add. And I can tell you that I have talked to Māori representation who have been on this council, who have felt as a minority because of not only the treatment from some councillors, but also the treatment from some staff. So we need to be keeping our public as part of this process. We need to make sure that if we are to go down that path, we have a true representation of the people of our public, which means we need to poll them, we need to get out there and we need to involve them in this discussion. And I believe 2 years from now, things will change. People's attitudes will change. And you will see a complete different representation on this council. So please, vote with me to take it out to a poll for all of our community to be involved.
If I speak to the amendment, am I still able to speak to the motion later?
Yes, indeed.
I just want to draw council's attention to this document. This is the local government New Zealand Manifesto for democracy, and it's a good document. LGNZ, of course, represent the 78 councils of New Zealand, and I just wanted to draw council's attention to page 27. Where stronger local democratic processes are discussed. LGNZ, on behalf of the 78 councils of New Zealand, state at number 4, referenda for Māori constituencies. And this is what they have to say. The ability to demand a poll to overturn a council decision to create a Māori ward or constituency is anomalous and discriminatory and should be removed. And I hope that, and I'm sure that there will be many people from all over the country watching our debate today, because I know I went online and I watched the Regional Council's debate, I watched the Far North District Council's debate, and I really hope that our government goes on to correct this anomaly, because we all know that if you go out to the poll, it does not reflect the needs and views and rights of the minority, which is the Tangata Whenua, Mana Whenua, and the Indigenous people of Aotearoa. So I do not support the amendment.
Thank you, Worship. And I supported the amendment for exactly, well, not the only reason, but that is one of the reasons. If we go to a poll with the 2022 election, it gives people standing the opportunity to voice their views on this matter. If we don't, as Councillor Murphy has just highlighted, quite clearly there will be a publicly demanded poll, which will cost the ratepayer an exorbitant amount of money and will achieve absolutely nothing in the way of forwarding the Maori point of view to council. democratic principles are fundamental to our society, and public opinion is fundamental to democracy. We need to go out to the public for their opinion. We're going to get it, whether we go out there for it or we don't. So it is better, in my view, that we take the initiative to ask for public opinion, rather than force it on our public to spend upwards of $200,000 to demand a public poll, which will be binding and which will put us back another 6 years at least. This is a huge, it's an enormously significant change to our democratic way of operating. It also bothers me, and I absolutely empathise with Councillor Golightly in that this is a torturous process. I find it debilitating almost that I know standing here not saying yay Maori wards is going to have me accused of being racist. There is nobody in this chamber less racist than me. But I'm channeling Mr. Peters' submission, who was quite clearly channeling a former mayor and deputy mayor, who both said quite fundamentally in this chamber that they would not want to be sitting around this chamber without the same mandate that everybody else had, that they had the opportunity to stand on their own feet. And you can't tell me that there are not most Maori people out there that are not at least the equal of councillors sitting around this table. I know of at least 3 local Maori families that are pretty much, every one of them are lawyers. And there is no reason. I mean, Maori people are perfectly capable of standing, being elected to council and government. It's not that long since we had 5 Maori members of parliament in Northland. All absolutely capable people. What I couldn't understand was that in the latest election, Maori didn't stand behind their Maori people. And so we've lost 2 of them. Potentially we could have lost a 3rd. It's, you know, quite honestly, if Maori really do want to sit around the table, then they need to support their own people. And that is why I'm supporting the amendment.
Any other debates? Councillor Cooper.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Ken Cooper and I represent the Bream Bay Ward, and I consider myself elected to this chamber to make decisions. And I expect to be held accountable for those decisions. I have no problem with that, that's how it should be. I'd like to acknowledge the people who have taken the time to pass their opinions on me, both by email and verbally. I sincerely appreciate those opinions that have come to me, both for and against both sides of this argument. I would also like to acknowledge Mr. Peters, who is someone standing in this community, and I appreciate your comments, and I hear what you have to say. I will not be supporting Councillor Cockerill's amendment, and I would support the original motion put by Your Worship. And the reason that I do is that I don't believe we are achieving democracy at the moment. I believe if you look for a definition of what democracy is, it is government of the people, by the people, for the people, which was used at Gettysburg, and it's as good as any that I can find. And we are not, and we do not, if you look around this chamber, have governments of the people, by the people, for the people. The argument that we subverting democracy by introducing Māori awards does not hold water for me. I consider the method by which people are elected to positions of governance to be a tool to achieve the governance that we desire. And so, therefore, I support Māori awards, as I have stated. It is a big day, and I acknowledge that. And I acknowledge the opinions of those people who have spoken. I certainly hold no animosity either way. So thank you very much.
Excuse me for not standing. So, like the first thing I wrote down before Councillor Cooper spoke was, we are elected to make decisions. They may be popular, they may not be popular, and that the decisions we make, we listen with them. The basic premise of the need for Māori wars acknowledges that the system does not work for Māori. The amendment moved by Councillor Coccarello is part of that system. We've heard that Māori are capable of standing for council and should be standing for council. Well, they have, and they're not on here. And that is part of the reason why we must bring in, this is part of the reason why I will not support the amendment, and that this poll is part of the system that I believe is not working. Last term I voted against Māori awards. I was a new term councillor. I've had a lot of time to consider, and I will speak on that afterwards, but I will not be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Worship. I also will not be supporting the amendment, and I do pay tribute to Councillor Murphy, who had gone back to read through local government documents. But it's really interesting that basically the local government New Zealand, which is the peak body for local government, has explicitly said in its comments on democracy that the referenda for Māori constituencies is discriminatory. And for me, the amendment that is putting forward is completely outside the pale, and so I will not be supporting it, and I reserve my right to speak later in support of Māori laws.
Councillor Martin.
Thanks to both of the speakers who came in. It takes a bit of courage to come in, particularly on a thing like this. First speaker spoke about the strong support for Māori awards out there. So if we're going to have democracy, why not have a vote and prove that? Why are we frightened to have a vote? Why would we not have a vote and prove that? You know, I'm probably the only one here whose sons played for the New Zealand Maoris. So the most precious things in my family, my children and my grandchildren, are all Maori. Same as most people, most Maori in this country. So I listened to what Mr. Peters said, and that is one of the iconic families of Northland and the whole of the country. And if he has reservations and concerns about the process that we're wanting to do, then I have to take that in hand too. I take that on board. And his strong point was about democracy. The fact that he's elected, the fact that Shane Murphy's elected, the fact that our Mayor Stan Sevenoff got elected twice, Kahu Sutherland a number of times. People can get out there. If the right people are put forward, they certainly can be elected and are, and make a good contribution. I don't know why the option, the recommendation is against democracy. It's to appoint, to change our democratic system, and not to have to ask the people. The people are going to be asked anyway, whatever happens here today. Because everybody wants to have some input into this, because I think it's so important. And there's no guarantee what the vote will be. No guarantee. So we can't take for granted that the people are going to go one way or the other. We need to give them the option. We need to support the democratic process And I believe the only way to do that is to have a vote of electors in the Māori district.
Thank you, Councillor Nutter. Councillor Connor.
I'd just like to read out what the Te Kariara Strategic Partnership Standing Committee noted to us. Notes the process to Council to consider Māori representation through the establishment of Māori wards, and recommends that Council consider introducing Māori representation for the 2022 and 2025 local government elections through the establishment of Māori wards, and notes that councillors need to keep an open.
Thank you, Councillor Connor. Councillor Innes.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is 7 years on council, and this decision has probably given me as much thought as any decision. And I think I reflect many of the councillors in the room today. I voted against Māori wards last time, and I just take a very pragmatic approach, and I'm generally fairly philosophical in how I approach most things. And I'm reflective really in terms of my first term on council. I chaired the planning committee, and on the planning committee there was a representative appointed, Māori representative appointed in terms of that standing committee. And I found the help that Julianne Chetnam, who was appointed, provided very good guidance. And a lot of that was really, often a decision couldn't be made, but it had to be taken back for discussion. But it gave me the confidence in chairing that meeting that I was reflecting the need within the Māori community. And I wasn't thinking that I could actually make that decision myself, although I'd been voted for that. So it's really been from that really to the standing committee that has recently been appointed. And to me, the standing committee is very much a relationship with Hapu. And I see that there's delegated responsibilities towards the standing committee. And in terms of those responsibilities, a lot of them relate to the RMA. And that essentially looks towards regulation and in terms of hapu development. I'm very supportive of a more proactive and decisive approach to decision making. And I firmly believe we need time to strengthen our relationship with hapu, and that the relationship of the standing committee is fundamental, and I would hope that that will always continue, because that strategic partnership that we have with hapu is absolutely fundamental in moving to a more proactive approach to be able to look at the future development of the district and with hapu. I'm also mindful of winds of change, and we sit here today and we know firmly that local government reform is very much on the table. We know that there's going to be a regionalisation of infrastructure, and those discussions are taking place at the moment. And also in terms of infrastructure, we've looked at the RMA, and we've seen that a review has been undertaken on that, and part of that will be actually dealing with regulation, spatial planning at a regional level. So I see that with the winds of change will come a different role for local government. And that role more emphasis in terms of social and cultural issues and the development of those within our district. So I can't support the amendment because I see with winds of change the role of local government is starting to change, and I think that we need fair representation of minority interest at a local level. Thank you.
Councillor Innes. Any further speakers to the amendment?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I hope you don't mind if I sit because I have to hold this up otherwise. I did have the RMA requirements already noted down, but my good friend here has already tipped the scales with that one. Over the last months, we've spent, I don't know how many hours and days trying to cement in the Te Karearea participation within Council, which came to its fruition last week, standing committee. And we've put a lot of effort into that, and it's a process. I think it deserves better than what we're looking like we're going to treat it with today. We heard at the end of that meeting a rather wise man who spoke of caution and being certain we have our beginnings cemented in before taking that leap of faith towards the future, i.e. Māori wards. Now, I'll expand on that just a little. Since the beginning of this consultation we've had with setting up Te Karearea, I have been quite vocal in saying that our strength begins at the beginning and not at the end. So anything that we want to achieve, you have to have your building block to start with. Don't go for the peak, go for the base and work your way through it. Te Karearea is the vehicle for that beginning. That's where the strength lies, and that's the basis for us to move forward. Once we have that cemented in place, then fine. Look at your Māori wards. I just remind you, there is a large Indian community, a large Chinese community, there's Filipinos, there's Yugoslavs, there's Italians. We've got one on our council. You know, are we going to have a ward for every ethnicity we have in the district? There won't be much room in this building if we do. So I'm just putting it out there. Let's focus on one thing, get it working properly, then move to the next step. That's been my thesis right from the beginning of this, and that's why I asked to go on that Māori participation group. So with that, I will be supporting Councillor Cockerell's amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Ruth. Any further debate on the amendment? Councillor Hawkes.
Thank you, Your Worship, and as the last speaker around the table anyway, we've got a right to reply, of course, but I just want to go back and probably have a different point of view here. As councillors, we take oaths to do various things. It doesn't matter what people may be doing or should not be doing, but legal obligation is one of them. And under the Local Government Act, and it's in the agenda, page 25, the Local Government Act is one of the oaths we commit to. And it says, under section 4, to maintain and improve opportunities for Māori to contribute to local government decision-making processes. And under 14D, a local authority should provide opportunities for Māori to contribute to decision-making. Nowhere there to say representation. So, judge our council on what we've achieved. I look across the photos of mayors there. The last 5 mayors, in some application, have tried to include Māori in decision making. They all tried, and they all didn't come up to the mark. This term, less than a year ago, we were challenged about doing something about it, very same issue. So I was asked to lead a process that looked at this very issue. And I'm a councillor long-standing here, and I've been through the process of all those other 5 years. I could understand where they came from and their intention. So very much similar to what Councillor Reid just said. Right from the start, we set up some working parties, we had meetings, we had workshops, working parties, workshops, and we worked through the issues. All the way along, I was working with the working party very strongly, equal input from Meriden and from the council side. But all the way I said, take the people with you. We ended up having a timeline of six months to embed the thinking across council. Had we rushed the process, we would have got a big no. We wouldn't have done our job properly. As it was, we got to deliver a standing committee here with the terms of reference where Māori are included in the decision-making table with certain responsibilities under terms of reference and also some decision-making on behalf of council. The committee has the right to make recommendations to any other committee of council and to make some of their own recommendations. So, in the workshop, it is quite evident that whatever we put before council, we wanted to make sure that we'd discussed it first and covered off the points. In our Takata area meetings now, we have 8 representatives from Random, 8 from council. Equal numbers, 50-50 split. So on any issue, we can debate using what we can find with the council understanding orders. 8 times maximum 5 minutes of standing order, you get 40 minutes of debate. Exactly the same as the people on the other side. Equal opportunities, and that's what we're trying to maintain. Māori wards, if you put Māori wards around here, 3 members, you've got 15 minutes to debate an item, with the other side of up to 55 minutes. That's not fair. So what we said, let's build the building blocks, let's come off a strong foundation, give it time to bed in. I feel that this whole ward system, it's undermined and it's taken the focus off what we're trying to achieve right now in this council. We've set it up, we've had good buy-in from Meriden, we've had very, very good buy-in from the community, but we've had very, very little opposition to it. This was the starting point. I've heard twice, and there must have been a bit of a team talk before, from a mayor and deputy mayor, about the winds of change. If the winds of change is going to happen, and if there's a feeling there, why does the government not just come out and mandate all council have Māori representation? So I've got the power. I feel that this is a bit of a smoke screen and a lot of other reform going through at present. We've got a lot right across north now, radio lines. We've got the 3 waters coming up that I'd love to debate with our Takata area meeting. And we've got a big push to act regionally. And a big push is coming to be a unitary authority. That's my opinion, but I can see it happening. That really takes the power away from our citizens. Now, I'm standing up here as a district councillor for the Whangarei district, making a decision on the best knowledge I've had, based on years of sitting around this table here, of not quite getting things across the line. We've got a system in place now where we are equal. We're sitting across the table, discussing the same matter, working through a list of priorities agreed to by Meriden and council. And so we should be proud of the fact that we're leading New Zealand on having a standing committee of that stature. And I don't think we're recognising that enough. We've done the hard work, we should let that get in. That will lead to further development of Meriden wherever they want to go. If they want to go to council, stand for council, reputation will be built. If they want to continue to push the wards, they can do so. But as chairman, when I was given the mandate to do this, I certainly wanted to have the opportunity to make sure that committee, made up of the Meriden and our council, had the right and the privilege of working together to make sure that we could work together in a very harmonious way. And I think the meeting last week, only last week, we only had our first meeting last week in this council chamber, and have this issue so close time, you know, I find it very, very annoying actually. But so I will support the amendment because I was put here by the people, and I think it's only right that the people should be involved in our future direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hobbs. Any further speakers on the amendment? I think I need Councillor Golightly and myself for the ones. Did you wish to speak to the amendment?
I will not be supporting the amendment. As I said in my original speaking, when I had the speaking time, I think the time's now. It's not in, what's that going to be, 2025 to consider this matter. Putting these things off is not really a good option.
Point of order, Your Worship. Point of order, Your Worship. 2022 is when the poll will be suggested, not 2025.
I think the point is that Councillor Peters has made is that if there is a poll in 2022, the instant award should be successful would not commence till 2025. And I think that was the point she was making. Sorry. Any further discussion? I will not be supporting the amendment because I think today is the day to make the decision. So I will put the amendment, and Councillor Martin has called for a division. Those in favour of the amendment, please raise your right hand.
Councillors Cockerillo, Pulse, Reid, Martin, Golightly and Deeming.
And those against?
Councillors Connor, Peters, Innes, Murphy, Cutforth, Benny, Cooper and Her Worship the Mayor.
The amendment is lost. Councillor, I will take, unless any other councillors wish to speak to the original motion. Councillor Murphy.
Yes, I do. Thank you. There's quite a few things that I want to say actually. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa ko Anna Murphy toku ingoa. I live in Nauru. I was here on council in the last term when this came to the vote. In the last term of council, there were only 4 councillors, I believe, who supported Māori voice. I am very pleased to be here again to have another opportunity to stand and support the winds of change, because I think that, as Councillor Peters said earlier, it's not an either or. Jade Kakia, who is on the new Kariere Standing Committee, also said this is a piece of the jigsaw. It's a tool in the toolbox. It is not the gold-plated answer, but as our Mayor said, democracy changes and evolves over time. What we're trying to do by the establishment of Māori wards is improve representation now for our people. As Councillor Innes said, we have to be pragmatic. And as Councillor Cooper said, something is not working. We need to bring all our people along with us. We've got serious issues that we need to work on today. Affordable housing, lack of housing, climate change, our response to COVID, 3 waters. We need Māori at the table with us. And I just want to challenge Councillor Holtz. Councillor Holtz is the chairman of Te Karere, which is our new standing committee. And my challenge is, and I just want to mihi out to Taipari and Janelle in the letters that they sent into our council that our mayor read out. And I want to challenge Councillor Holtz as the chair of our committee that the iwi and hapu of Te Tai Tokoro and Whangarei, Te Ringa Parawa have spoken, and they have told us that.
Councillor Lemon, your point of order.
I don't believe it is correct to challenge a councillor who has just expressed his own opinion in the chamber. He's perfectly entitled to do that without being challenged by another councillor personally.
Thank you, Councillor Deming.
I withdraw my word challenge.
Thank you, Councillor Deming.
I don't mind.
Okay, so I also wanted to say, there's a few other points that I wanted to make. Yep, I've got quite a lot to say. Yeah. So our community do see us as being leaders. They look to us. They look to us to lead by example and to really stand up for what we believe in. And I've read the comments, you know, in all our council meetings, which are now being streamed live, which is fantastic, because people have a chance to tune in, hear what we're saying. And I read all the hundreds of comments, and a lot of them are coming from young people, and they say, where are the Māori at the table? Where are they? They don't represent us. And so this is why I really take on board what Councillor Laws said earlier, which is about representation. And I think Councillor Cooper said this actually helps us to do our job better, because all we're trying to do here is make good decisions. We just want to make the best decisions that we can. And so we need Māori here at the table. I pulled out, this is a document that I had on hand when we debated this last time. This is a paper produced by the Human Rights Commission, and it was really interesting because the Race Relations Commissioner at the time, a couple of the recommendations were that it should be iwi and hapu. It should be them that discuss whether or not they want Māori seats in local or regional council. And councils should support the Māori choice. And I think our hapu and iwi have clearly indicated their support for Māori wards. And then I also just want to go on to something that the Judge Trapsky, so he was involved in the Bay of Plenty Regional Council process. And it's very good because he sums up the views of those in favour and the views of those against. And in his conclusion, he says, "It seems to me that however we regard democracy personally, the Council, in considering the proposal, ought to be guided by the fact that since 1867, the delivery of democratic government in New Zealand has been affected by a system in which there have been Māori electorates and seats in the House of Representatives reserved specifically for people who enrol on the Māori roll." And I actually just want to go back to what Councillor Ian Peters said, because he actually raised some good questions. What he said are Māori capable of taking their own place? And yes, they are. Are they equal? Yes, they are. But are they the Indigenous people and the tangata whenua of our country? Yes, they are. And I support Māori wards. I support them wholeheartedly, and I support us going forward together and making things better for our district. Oh, and that was the very last thing I wanted to add, which was that I also had that question, I raised that question. I wondered that if we had Māori wards, when those councillors were elected, what oath would they swear? And so I emailed the Mayor and asked, would they swear the same oath? And yes, they are elected by ward, and then they swear the same oath as all councillors, which is to represent the whangarei, rohi, and the best interests of all of us. So, yeah, it's about manaakitanga, tahitanga, whanaungatanga, and I really hope that we can, keep making our district a better place together. Thank you.
Councillor Benny.
So this is not about cost. If it was, we wouldn't make any decisions in this chamber. I've spent the whole of my working life working for, with and against disadvantaged people. And a disproportionate number of those were Māori. Last week I was up court on jury duty, I might add, but it reminded me of what a mess, and I call it a disgrace, our justice system is, and how that And I know this has nothing to do with the justice system, but to me the electoral system does not work as well. It's a system that is not working. I don't have the ability to change the justice system. I wish I did. I have the opportunity here to make a small change in our electoral system. With our Te Karara Standing Committee, led by Councillor Hoss, a great initiative. A lot of people suggested the sky would fall in, and it hasn't. To me, it is a great step forward, but it is only a step. And I think that I'm ready to take the next step. In the elections that I've been in, and I've been in two, is that there were several excellent Māori candidates, and I would have voted for them myself if I wasn't in it. But they did not get the results they deserved, I believed. And that is the fundamental issue with Māori in the system. That is why I think we must do something to address the faults of the system. We must give Māori a voice, and that is why I will be supporting the recommendation.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be supporting the recommendation, and I'm mindful of the comment that was made. I think Anna, Councillor Murphy read it. Our democracy changes over time, and it's a comment that you also made, Your Worship. And I'm supporting the amendment, though I guess it's reluctantly in some ways, because I think that we missed a real opportunity some time ago, some months ago, in terms of changing our democratic process here by not bringing in an SEV system, which to me would have been the best way to address the issue that Councillor Benny commented on, in terms of really good Māori candidates standing in the ward we both stood in, who I think would have certainly had a much better shot if we had being on council as young Māori representatives, if we had a different voting system which allowed for proportionality and allowed for a ranked voting system, if you like, as we do have in DHB and as many other councils, including small councils like Kaipara, have. And I think that was a really big missed opportunity. Would have encouraged and facilitated a lot more Māori at the table. As people will know, I did not support Kāreria as a standing committee. And as Councillor Golightly bravely said, I accept that that was not a decision that was welcomed by many people, and possibly people found that quite surprising in terms of my general political views, I guess. But I strongly think that the system of local government we have is based on a voting system of one person and one vote. And my concern with Kāreria was that it was not based on that system. Putting that aside, Māori wards guarantee representation, and representation is what we need around the table for Māori. My concern is, I'm supporting it, my concern is two things. One, that in general, the number of Māori going onto the Māori roll is decreasing. More and more Māori are going onto the general roll. So in one sense, we're going against the trend. My other concern is that Māori will not stand in general seats. And I hope that I'm really wrong with that. I really hope I am. And when I look at what's happened at central government, I'm sort of reassured, I guess, by that. We now have, 25 Māori, I think. Twice the number of gays, but I'm ever hopeful, but I think when more Māori representation than the general Māori population and the equivalent number of gays, so I'm sort of reasonably happy. But I do really urge Māori in particular to stand in general wards as well as standing in Māori seats if that goes through. And I look at I look at what we have now in government, and I'm just so inspired by the latest central government with Manaia Mahuta as both Minister of Māori local government still and Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I'm looking at real change coming that way, and I think again change is coming here. So, yeah, democracy changes over time, but it's still based on the voting system. And I think having Māori as elected representatives through Māori wards is a democratic process, and so I will be supporting it.
Councillor Peters and Councillor Innes.
Unsurprisingly, I will support this motion.
Councillor Peters, I think you already have spoken to the original motion.
Did I?
Yes.
Councillor Innes.
Thank you, Worship. Just picking up on Councillor Holson, not picking arguments at all, Councillor. Just your term annoying, and I agree. It's annoying to just have the standing committee appointed and starting to look at the future, particularly of Hapu, and that standing committee is very much, it's appointed from Hapu and it establishes a strong relationship with Hapu. And I really see that there are going to be incredible benefits out of that in terms of areas such as Hapu management plans, for example, where aspirations of Hapu can be expressed and they're given weight in terms of our regulation and district planning. What I see in terms of winds of change are really about representation, and I pick up really on what Councillor Benny has mentioned when we look at the court system, when we look at various statistics, particularly in the health system, and we go further afield and look at any aspect of social life, we do see major issues and a misproportion of representation by Māori within those disadvantaged statistics. So I see the step forward in terms of representation at a local government level is key, and part of that will be ensuring through a voting system that there is representation there, because local government is changing. We will lose a number of our functions, and we will get a stronger emphasis on social and cultural matters. So I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Innes. Any further debate? Councillor Hobbs.
So, thank you, Your Worship. Just speaking to the motion, I think you've got to be really, really cautious of this vote, because the intention is very, very clear and very, very welcomed by a lot of people. But you're not the masters of your own destiny here. What happens now is a decision is made now. 5% of the electors can demand a poll. 5% of the electors can demand a poll. If the poll is then run, it is a binding poll. So if it comes and say, the populace say we do not want Māori wards, that's the end of the matter for another 6 years. What I was trying to encourage was the amendment, because we're working through our standing committee, getting to a point we could have run a referendum in that term, in 2022, had it operational if they wanted Māori wards. That is the whole point of the amendment. Absolute whole point of it. We're including all the populace. We have to, as district councillors, and say, this decision, you might think you have a small win here today, but you've just now handed it out to everyone in the community to have their say. And only 5% is needed to have a poll, which leads on to a binding poll. We've got no say in the outcome. And what we're trying to say, based on experience around the table, I felt we're on the right track to deliver Māoridom the best possible chance to get representation on council. Thank you.
Any further debate? I'll take my right of reply. I'm going to right of reply. Councillor Holst, you're absolutely right. The Local Electoral Act is faulty. We have to collectively advocate to get rid of that ability for 5% of electors to overturn the only decision of this council that we make that can be overturned by the poll. Therein lies the fault. Further to that, Te Tiriti o Waitangi was signed by the Crown and Māori. Nobody else. Today's decision is about representation. We've covered off participation. We've got participation through Te Kāriaria. The decision-making ability of that committee is very small. I welcome that step. It is good, but it is nowhere near what Māori want. It's been talked about the winds of change. My heart and my head both today tell me that this is the right thing to do. Let's have the courage to trim our sails, maximise this strong change in the wind, and point our waka together toward a united future. Thank you. I will put the vote, and Councillor Martin has called for a division. Those in favour?
Councillors Connor, Peters, Innes, Murphy, Cutforth, Benny, Cooper, and Her Worship the Mayor.
Those against?
Councillors Cockerillo, Hulse, Reid, Martin, Golightly, and Deeming.
The motion is carried. Thank you to our members of the public for attending today. We do have another item of council business. It's item 4.1 on our council agenda.
I'll sing that.
Council, let's just wait for the legal gallery to do so now. Members of our public, there are...
Excuse me, everyone, quiet.
Thank you.
We're still in a meeting.
Our council meeting continues, if you don't mind. Item 4.1 on our agenda, Councillor Deeming has moved and Councillor Cockerillo has seconded. Councillor Deeming. Thank you. Do we do minutes that are available to speak to this? Anyway, I'm not sure. Alison?
I'll just carry on. The applicant's vision is to provide a viable and sustainable town centre which integrates with the surrounding commercial, mixed-use and residential uses. The private plan change application has been assessed with regard to the requirements of the Resource Management Act, and the report assesses that everything that's needed on the basis of findings and conclusions contained in the consultant's report. It is recommended to Council to accept and process the proposal as a private plan change application. There are no grounds to reject the application, and there are no grounds to adopt it. We don't want to actually take it over ourselves. So accepting the request for the applicant to continue is the logical option.
Thank you, Councillor Deeming. Councillor Cooper.
Can I ask a question, please? If we adopt this private plan change today, or the ability for them to go ahead with it, will the people of Ruakaka have an ability to have an input into what is said now, and what form will that take?
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor, can you respond to that, please?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, so the plan change will go through a formal public notification, just as a council-initiated plan change would. So it would be open for an initial submission period and then a further submission period. And it will be directly notified to all of those parties who have a close interest to it. So at this stage, we have selected anyone from the State Highway intersection through to One Tree Court. So all of the landowners in that catchment would be sent a letter directly.
Follow-up question, please. Melissa, did you make that recommendation in this report, or was that someone else? I have a question. I guess my question is, and you might be able to answer it anyway, is do you take into account the I mean, obviously you must have, I suppose, but the impact on the I said it in the original time that people came in. I don't want to create a two-class system where we have a Ruakaka town centre and a Flashy town centre potentially everywhere to head down the road, and then the effect on those people who live in the Ruakaka village. So, can you just give me some background on how you thought about that, please?
Through you, Madam Chair. So, at this point in time, you are not considering the merits of the proposal. You are considering to accept, reject, or adopt the plan change. Once it goes through the process, there is a hearing, and the merits of the proposal are considered at the hearing. The information that the applicant put forward, the proposal that was put forward, the reporting planner has considered on behalf of council, and it's been reviewed by technical experts, and economics is one aspect of that. And the applicant was asked for further information, they've supplied that information, and it's come back to you in a form that is ready for notification. So the merits of this have not been, worked out fully, is the best way to put it.
Thank you. I think we're probably going to miss you when you're going.
No, thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Innes?
Thank you, Worship. I noticed that it's 127 hectares of land, which is a substantial size. I'm also mindful of a private plan change that was also brought in place around Warkworth, which is very similar in terms of looking at a mix of land use, and discussions that I've had with some business leaders who are involved with Ruakaka would tend to indicate that affordable housing is very much a key issue, and the ability to provide for a range of housing styles within the area is important. I feel this plan change addresses that. It also starts to look towards a more commercial development rather than industrial development, and we've seen a lot of, I suppose, new industry or new commerce in terms of technology that is becoming quite critical. I see that this will provide for our needs going further. But picking up on Councillor Cooper's points, it now goes out for public comment, and I'll be interested to see the comments that come back in relation to the plan change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Innes. Councillor Murphy?
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to pay this as much time as possible because I realised that our agenda item really didn't have very much information at all. So I read through the two 500-page sets and appendices which were on our website, and they were really, really interesting because I did have a lot of questions about things like what was proposed in the assessment of environmental effects. And so what I found answered most of my questions. I do have a question around, so we just signed our last strategy meeting, a Manifesto agreement with Tātu Harakeke, and in the documents, Tātu Harakeke made a couple of requests, and one of them was that the Marsden City Partnership and PTB establish a relationship agreement. So I was just wondering, what with that, with our Manifesto agreement and this plan change, what is the process for Patuharakiki going forward?
For you, Madam Chair, so Council served this on Patuharakiki, and that's how we understood that there were concerns with the original draft, and that fed into the information request to the applicant. The applicant then responded to that information request with respect to an ongoing relationship agreement that's between the applicant and Patuharakiki, and that would operate separate from the Manifesto agreement. So the agreement, the Manifesto is more about the process that we follow with our plan changes, and we have followed that process with this plan change. So even though that agreement wasn't signed at the time, we followed best practice.
Right. Yeah, because it's very, it's quite wordy and complicated, and I was trying to understand if in that agreement we would actually lay out that a developer should have a relationship agreement or some kind of agreement. But so that answers my question. So that's for them now to work out. Interesting. Okay. Well, I guess we just watch it with interest and see. My other question was just around because it's such a low-lying area, and I know that David Badham did make a comment that though the issues around the resource consents would be dealt with at a later date, so like the plan change didn't actually cover how we would manage the fact that the development is in a very low-lying flood-prone area. But he made a statement about the fact that we kind of deal with that as, I guess, applications were made at a later date.
Through you, Madam Chair, so we're just double checking the detail for you. So that was raised in further information, and the layout of the zoning has been, the low density land use zoning has been applied to the areas that would be at highest risk. But I also note that Council has a future hazard plan change that it needs to work through, and that would apply any necessary flood susceptibilities or flood risk layering on top of, with rules as required.
Yep.
So again, that's a matter that could come through the hearing.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, Worship. I've always got a bit of opposition to some of what's being proposed here. It's mainly because we keep getting the new owner of the land going for a plan change all the time. And council laws will now be cut out of the process. So we pass this today, we're out of it. And yet we wear all the consequences of making decisions. In the year 2000, the plan was adopted. That tier leaf bit of land where this sits was earmarked future industrial, mainly for the overflow from the port in the year 2000, will be needed in the year 2025. So we're not too far away. We hear all this talk, the port's expanding. So it started off with that. And then the new buyers in 2009 went through a plan change to create some of what's in this application here and some other business. But we went through another plan change. Here we are, all within 20 years, we're getting a third major look at this bit of land. It does not say in the application what they're going to do with the big mountain of peat that's covering probably 40 hectares of land. What's going to happen to that? It does not say anywhere that the railway line runs right down the back of where they want to put the new town centre. And the railway line site is still not being designated. There's a broad corridor, but the final design hasn't been worked out. And yet, West councillors, with this information, we're cut out of the process, unless we make a private submission so we go and talk to the commissioners. And that's a real disjointed arrangement. We take all the responsibility, but we have no say. And I don't like that system we're entering into. Because like this, as a board councillor, I did area for some time, going to all the public meetings, hear what all the public are told, and then 10 years later they get told another story, and here we go again, going to get told another story. Our credibility is at stake, not the developers. It's in our district plan. So yeah, we need to. It's a bit of a hard one to see what direction we're actually taking on this.
Minister, can you just outline to us what our responsibilities are as elected members in this process?
So through you, Madam Chair, I hear your frustration. There is nothing stopping someone from applying for a private plan change application. They can do so within 2 years of the previous decision. Council has an obligation to accept it and process it, which is what we've done for the initial assessment of the information that has been supplied. There are very limited grounds for Council to reject an application, and this application has been assessed, and Ms Ryan has confirmed that they have passed the tests. There's no grounds for Council to reject. Council is stuck with considering. Sorry?
Explain, adopt. What that would.
Yes, so that's where I was just going. So if Council was to adopt the plan change, it then becomes a Council-initiated plan change. Council takes full responsibility for the cost of the notification and hearing on the said plan change. Whereas if it stays as an accepted plan change, Council does not cover the cost. The cost is covered by the applicant until Council makes its decision. Then Council must defend that decision through appeals. So the cost of appeal falls to Council. So from a cost perspective and a budget perspective, it is preferable to accept the plan change. Now, a councillor could sit on the hearing panel, and then you would have representation from this council through the hearing process. So that is a path forward for you to be involved. Absolutely, council departments can make submissions. So in the past, infrastructure have made submissions on council-initiated plan changes and private applications, and that's a path forward as well for further input into the application.
So if we were to look at the option of having a council on the hearings panel, is that a decision for today or a future decision?
Usually that would be future, and it would be a councillor who has a commissioner qualification.
Thank you.
Just sorry, through you, Madam Chair. The rail corridor just designated, and I know that the applicant has redesigned the application based on the workshop that was had with council and the information requests. So there is some change to make sure that there is a buffer from the residential and the rail corridor, and they are recommending some commercial zoning through there, which will remove the sensitive activities away. So from a planning perspective, there's a reasonable recommendation to put forward.
I note that there are sound insulation requirements for dwellings and was it?
You know, there's fine things.
Any further discussion? Councillor Demon, you're waiting for the floor?
No, I don't think you. Melissa's done a good job. Thank you.
I will put the motion. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. That brings us to an end of our council meeting today. Bear in mind that we have also had